All right. Today we're going to continue our examination of graphic design principles. And if you remember, we have the 4 design principles create an acronym called CRAP. And today we're going to look at the R, or the repetition aspect of design. All right, so this is repetition. And Robin's principle of repetition states, repeat some aspect of the design throughout the entire piece. Let's put that in our notes. The repetitive element can be a bold font, thick rule, a certain bullet, color, design element, particular format, spatial relationships, etc. It can be anything that a reader will visually recognize. I'm sure you already use repetition in your work, right? It's something that comes natural. You'll see repetition all around you in every type of design, not just graphic design, right? When you listen to a song, right, the chorus repeats. That repetition of the chorus brings the whole song together, right? It gives it a consistency, right? And it helps the listener grab onto something, right? The same idea applies to graphic design as well. What beginners often need to do is push this idea further. Turn that inconspicuous repetition into a visual key that ties the publication together, or in our case, game UI, so to speak. All right. As I said, repetition can be thought of as consistency. If you look through a 16-page newsletter, is the repetition of certain elements, their consistency, that makes each of those 8 pages appear to belong to the same newsletter. Repetition goes beyond just being naturally consistent. It is a conscious effort to unify all parts of a design. All right, so we've seen this business card before. In the second example below, he's added a repetitive element, a repetition of the strong, bold typeface. If you look at it, notice where your eye moves. When you get to the phone number, where do you look next? Do you find that you go back to the other bold type? This is a visual trick designers have always used to control a reader's eye to keep your attention on the page as long as possible. The bold repetition also helps unify the entire design. This is a very easy way to tie pieces of a design package together. So look at these 2 designs. Here he has emboldened the phone number, which ties together with the bold title, right? Take advantage of those elements you're already using to make a project consistent and turn those elements into repetitive graphic symbols. Are all the headlines in your newsletter 14-point times bold? How about investing in a very bold sans serif typeface and make all your heads something like 16-point antique olive black? So here we have something we can see there's some contrast and there's repetition, right? But here, see, the headlines, subheadings are a good place to start when you need to create repetitive elements, since you are probably consistent with them anyway. So take that consistent element, such as the typeface for the headlines and subheads, and make it stronger. So here he uses the repetition of a different font face for the headlines and the bold. If you have multiple page publications, and what we're dealing with in game design is multiple different screens of UI, right? Repetition is a major factor in the unity of those pages. When readers open the document or when they open your game, it should be perfectly and instantly obvious that page 3 and page 12 are really part of the same publication. In our case, each panel of your UI should have repetitive design elements so that they all appear like they're part of the same game, right? Part of the same design. They should not look radically different. And this is something that I've seen a lot of students do, actually. Right, so here is a newsletter, and well, they don't give you multiple pages, but the consistent double rule on all pages right here. Consistent typeface and headlines and subheads and consistent space above each. The text has a bottoming out point, but not all text must align here if there is a consistent repetitive starting point at the top of the page. This single rule repeats across the bottom of the page. Page numbers are in the same place and in the same typeface on each page. If everything is inconsistent, how would anyone visually understand that something in particular is special? That's a very good point. If you have strongly consistent publication, you can throw in surprise elements. Save those surprises for items you want to call special attention to. So can you point out the consistent, repetitive elements of this book? This single wide column takes up the same space as two columns, maintaining the consistency of the outer borders. Note the repetitive use of the triangular shape in the list and in the caption opposite page. That shape is probably used elsewhere in the publication as well. To create a consistent business package with a business card, letterhead, and envelope, use a strong display of repetition, not only within each piece, but between all the pieces. You want the person who receives the letter to know you are the same person who gave them a business card last week. And create a layout that allows you to align the printed letter with some element in the stationery design. This is the whole idea of branding, right? When you brand something, you create a consistent design between all the things that you send out that are part of your brand, right? And that's a huge thing when it comes to promotional elements. You can see that a letter type with a solid left alignment would create a strong impression on this page. Repetition helps organize the information. It helps guide the reader through the pages. It helps unify disparate parts of the design. So here we have a repetition. So bold typeface, light typeface, square bullets, indents, spacing, and alignments. If there's an element that strikes your fancy, go with it. Perhaps it's a piece of clip art or a picture font. Feel free to add something completely new simply for the purpose of repetition, or take a simple element and use it in various ways, different sizes, colors, angles. Sometimes the repeated items are not exactly the same objects, but objects so closely related that their connection is very clear. Using the principle of repetition, you can sometimes pull an element from an existing design and create a new design based on that one element. Remember this letterhead with the dots from Chapter 3? For a repetitive element, I capitalized on the dots. I enlarged 2 dots and put the little pictures of Mom and Pop inside. Mom and Pop are actually characters in the typeface called Mini Pix Little Folks. Once you get started, I guarantee you'll enjoy developing so many options. So he's taken these dots and he's enlarged them, right? So, and he's used the dots between the elements of the address as well. Here's another example of how you can use repetition as a basis for your design. It's fun to do, just find an element you like and play with it. Alright, so in this experiment, he repeated one of the dots, made it really large, and put Mom's picture in it. Not wanting to leave Pop out, I put a white version of him in his own smaller plum dot and reversed him to the paper color. Sometimes the mere suggestion of a repeated element can get the same results as if you use the whole thing. Try including just a portion of a familiar element or use it in a different way. This typewriter image, of course, has been used on all the screenwriting conferences promotional material, so at this point we don't have to use the entire image. Once again, as an example at the top, we see the advantage of using just part of a recurring image. The reader actually sees the whole typewriter. Repetition also gives a sense of professionalism and authority to your pieces. It gives your reader the feeling that someone is in charge because repetition is obviously a thoughtful design decision. Once again, you can see that repetition doesn't mean you have to repeat exactly the same thing. In the card above, the headlines are all the same typeface, but different colors. Unity with variety. The illustrations are all different styles, but all rather funky and 50s. Just make sure you have enough repetitive elements so the differences are clear, not just a jumbled mess. For instance, in this example, you can see that the recipes all follow the same format. When there's an underlying sense of structure, you can be more flexible with the other elements. So, for a summary of repetition of visual elements throughout the design unifies and strengthens a piece by tying together otherwise separate parts. Repetition is very useful on one-page pieces and is critical in multi-page documents, where we often call it being consistent. The basic purpose. The purpose of repetition is to unify and to add visual interest. Don't underestimate the power of the visual interest of a page. If a piece looks interesting, it is more likely to be read. Think of repetition as being consistent, which I'm sure you do already. Then push the existing consistencies a little further. Can you turn some of those consistent elements into a part of the conscious graphic design, as with the headline? Do you use a 1-point rule at the bottom of each page under each heading? How about using a 4-point rule instead to make the repetitive elements stronger and more dramatic? Then take a look at the possibility of adding elements whose sole purpose is to create a repetition. Do you have a numbered list of items? How about using a distinctive font or a reverse number and then repeating that treatment throughout every numbered list in the publication? At first, simply finding existing repetitions and then strengthen them. As you get used to the idea and the look, start to create repetitions to enhance the design and the clarity of the information. Repetition is like accenting your clothes. If a woman is wearing a lovely black evening dress with chic black hat, she might accent her dress with red heels, red lipstick, and a tiny red corsage. What to avoid? Avoid repeating the elements so much that it becomes annoying or overwhelming. Be conscious of the value of contrast. Read the next chapter in the section on contrasting type. For instance, if the woman were to wear the black evening dress with a red hat, red earrings, red lipstick, a red scarf, a red handbag, red shoes, and a red coat, the repetition would not be a stunning and unifying contrast. It would be overwhelming, and the focus would be confused. So that is repetition. Use this chapter, reread this chapter when you're doing your repetition forum post for this week. And by all means, email me with any questions you have about this subject. Thank you.